Welcome to Heavy Networking, the flagship podcast from the Packet Pushers Podcast Network. If this is the only pod you're listening to from Packet Pushers, you are missing out on so much more that we offer for your professional career development. We're up to 12 podcasts now covering networking, security, DevOps, and career for anyone, no matter how many years of experience you've got on your resume. Something for everybody. I'm Ethan Banks, your host today. Drew Connery Murray is traveling and couldn't make it for this episode, but you can still connect with us on LinkedIn or the Packet Pushers Community Slack group. And by the way, subscribe to Human Infrastructure, the newsletter Drew and I write for you each and every week. You can find everything Packet Pushers offers you at packetpushers.net. On today's podcast, we explore the network as a service offerings of sponsor Alkira. And if you think of Alkira as a multi-cloud networking service, you're somewhat right in that multi-cloud networking, that's definitely one of Alkira's capabilities, but you are missing the bigger story. Like what? Well, our guest, Manan Shah, is here to tell us all about it. Manan is the SVP of Products at Alkira, and he's been there since Alkira's early days. Manan, welcome to Heavy Networking, and we spent some quality time together prepping for this show, and you had said that a lot of people put Alkira into that multi-cloud networking service bucket, but that is not the complete picture. So what is correct? How should we think of Alkira?
Thanks, Ethan. Absolutely correct in the sense that multi-cloud networking service, or as it's called MCNS, that's a dominant use case on why customers use Alkira service. But that is, at the end of the day, still one of the use cases that Alkira provides. What Alkira really provides is an end-to-end networking platform with on-demand networking infrastructure. Customers essentially leverage the network infrastructure to design, deploy, and manage the network, where MCNS is one use case, and there are many more use cases like extranet as a service, security services insertion, and a variety of other use cases that customers use Alkira for. Think of it as building a virtual colo on demand. That's like a SaaS service for networking.
So so networking as a service, would it be fair to call it WAN services predominantly?
Not just WAN services. It also includes, as we talked about, MCNS. It connects cloud to cloud, on-prem to cloud. So it's not just a WAN service. Think of this as you are building a network that is delivered from the cloud. What Alkira is doing is equivalent to what cloud providers have done for applications. So you get a VM or a Kubernetes cluster from a infrastructure as a service provider. You don't care about the hypervisor, the host, and the underlying infrastructure that runs into. Similarly, Alkira provides the network infrastructure on which you design and deploy your end-to-end network, including the network services.
Well, you hit on it for me when you said cloud, that it's, think of if it's a network basically built in the cloud for you. So you're not on premises for me. You're not like replacing, I don't know, a Cisco switch I might have in a rack somewhere, but I just need to connect from my on-premises facilities into that cloud. And in theory, I could build anything I want from there.
And globally, it doesn't matter where your users are, doesn't matter where your clouds and applications in the clouds are. You are essentially building a global network from the network infrastructure that's provided as a service to you.
Now, you mentioned a bunch of use cases, and we've already mentioned the multi-cloud networking service. Give some examples of what network engineers are building with Alkira.
Yeah, so do a couple of examples of some of our customers that have built Coke Industries, for example. Their central IT team, Coke Global Services, or KGS, leverages Alkira to provide a service to all of their lines of businesses. That includes leveraging Alkira for multi-cloud as well as firewall consolidation. So all of their lines of businesses are essentially, think of them as network segments on our fabric. And on each of the network segments, you connect your on-prem networks, you connect your cloud networks, you bring in your business partners. If you do a M&A, you can integrate them. All of that is done on our fabric. Another example that one of our other customers, S&P Global, has done is they are actually not only connecting to multiple clouds, in their case, AWS and Google, but they are also connecting their business partners. So they acquired a company called IHS Markit, and IHS Markit has literally hundreds and thousands of business partners. Now, historically, these business partners used to be a point-to-point connectivity from a partner data center to their data center. Guess what has happened? A lot of applications have moved to the cloud for our customers as well as their partners. So it's no longer a point-to-point connectivity from data center to data center. It's a data center to cloud, cloud to data center, and cloud to cloud. Now imagine the complexity, it's just gone 4 or 5 folds. And how do you provide that simple way of connecting your business partners into your network and securely is what Alkira provides.
Interesting. This is a use case that I could have. There was a network I was working on some years back that was medical information exchange, basically, a bunch of different medical service providers. And the way we stood it up at that time, this goes back, again, some years, was private MPLS. That was the way to do it.
Exactly.
You wanted to connect in, you'd order up a circuit. It would take 30, 60, 90 days, all depending, and you stand it up, and you play around with costs. You got to ship a router out there, and and so on. And then you got to govern security some way. Because not everyone was allowed to talk to everybody. We were kind of an extranet, but we had to have strict security controls on who could talk to whom, because of A, that was part of the service we were providing. We charged for that, but then B, HIPAA requirements and so on. It was a complex nightmare. What you're describing, part of what you're trying to sell me, Manan, is that it would be easier to build such a thing on Alkira.
Absolutely. So instead of getting a circuit and shipping a router to your partner, you can bring up that partner connectivity in a matter of 2-3 days. Like as I talked about S&P Global, they've done about 300 to 400 business partners in a span of few months. So you can literally bring in a partner and onboard them in a couple of days as opposed to 3 to 6 to 9 months.
A couple other things you mentioned as you were describing what network engineers are building. You said firewall consolidation was a use case for one of your customers. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is historically, if you look at how firewalls were deployed in your data center, when you had data center as a hub of your network, was you typically would have internet egress and internet ingress firewalls, a pair of firewalls or a set of firewalls providing that internet connectivity. Then you would have firewalls that are doing north-south or east-west communication. So with Alkira, what you can do is you can deploy a firewall as a pool of firewalls, and they are never internet exposed, but yet they service the functions of internet egress, internet ingress for a DMZ use case, as well as north-south and east-west, all of that on the same pool of firewalls. And not only for one line of business, but across multiple lines of business, because Alkira is responsible for managing the segmentation and keeping the traffic isolated. So if you think about all of these use cases across different lines of business, you can combine that into a pool of auto-scaling firewalls, which will shrink and expand as and when the traffic needs to do. And as a result, you can really go about doing a firewall consolidation on the Alkira platform.
Okay, so this is not a bring my own firewall scenario like I might do with a lot of public cloud providers. Maybe I'm a Palo Alto Networks customer and I'm going to stand up a virtual firewall in my cloud. I'm not doing that. This is Alkira is providing me with a firewall service that I'm consuming in the cloud. There's not even a piece of hardware involved here, at least not to me. I'm consuming it as a cloud service.
That's a great point, Ethan, that you bring. Alkira is completely born in the cloud company, so everything that we do is software and is provided as a service. Having said that, from a firewall standpoint, we always offered a marketplace of solutions to our customers. So if a customer loves Palo Alto, like you mentioned, they can absolutely bring their own Palo Alto license. But the life cycle, the auto scaling, the network stitching, all of that is done on the Alkira fabric and the traffic steering. So customers can continue to get their firewall vendor of choice licenses to the Alkira platform. And Alkira does support Fortinet, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Cisco, connectivity, Zscaler, all of that. So customers truly have different options on what they want to do from a security posture standpoint.
Okay, and okay, another term you've mentioned here is the Alkira fabric. So what is that? I'm connecting to, if I was to draw it on a whiteboard, is it just a cloud? Is that the Alkira fabric?
Yeah, so again, an interesting question. So Alkira provides, so if we talk about the Alkira platform, so think of any SaaS service, and that SaaS service is essentially a portal, and I use the word portal a bit loosely because it's a user interface, it's APIs, it's SDKs, it's Terraform, all of that, and that is the way to access the service. But the heart of the service is what we call the Alkira Cloud Exchange point. And each Alkira Cloud Exchange point is essentially a purpose-built Alkira fabric that is a cluster of networking nodes. It's not a router or a appliance or physical or virtual that you deploy, but it's a fully redundant, highly available fabric of nodes that kind of conforms to the SDN principles, where you have a bunch of
Hmm.
forwarding nodes, we have some control plane, you have some
Okay.
management plane, and that's a fabric that Alkira deploys in every region where Alkira is present.
So I'm hearing perhaps behind the scenes there's virtual network forwarding kind of instances that you're spinning up on behalf of your customers, and I'm consuming those. It's something like that.
Absolutely, it's a fully multi-tenanted service that Alkira provides to their customers.
Which is interesting. As a consumer of the Alkira service, I don't actually have to care about that, but it is interesting to know how you built what you built.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to start a company today, what would you do? You'll probably have either Office 365 or G Suite. You will have a NetSuite or a Salesforce or a HubSpot or a Marketer. Think of all of these as SaaS services. So when we started the company, the whole idea was, why can't networking be delivered as a service where we provide the network infrastructure, we manage that, we monitor that, we deliver that, and we upgrade that. The customers don't have to get all of the headache of managing the infrastructure, but they can get all the benefits of sophisticated networking capabilities.
Very good. From another engineering kind of question, Manan, what does Alkira replace in my network? Or maybe let me put it a different way. Is there some part of my network stack I get to retire or maybe just not build at all if I'm using Alkira?
Yeah, there are various aspects that you don't need to build at all. First of all, if you are, let's say, almost all customers are at least in a single cloud today. So if you are in a single cloud, single region, but wanting to move to multiple clouds or multiple regions of the same cloud, you don't need to worry about any knowledge of underlying networking constructs that cloud providers provide. As you know, Ethan, we have talked in the past as well. Every cloud provider is so different with different set of capabilities, different set of limitations. It's extremely hard to stay up to date with all of these capabilities and limitations and nuances on how you do things. Alkira abstracts all of that. For example, if you are in AWS, you wouldn't have to worry about route tables or transit gateways or any of that. So all you see from your perspective as an engineer is when you go to AWS console, you will see your VPC is attached to a TGW. Whether the life cycle of TGW, the segmentation, the routing, all of that is handled by the Alkira infrastructure. So you don't have to worry about all of the capabilities and nuances of single cloud and multi-cloud. Similarly, you don't have to worry about how do I stitch a firewall or how do I stitch a load balancer or how do I integrate a DDI service like an Infoblox. All of that is provided to you as a service on the platform.
Okay, so you mentioned you gave an example of AWS and a transit gateway, and that's my connection. I don't have to worry about it from there. Does that mean you're handling the cloud native transit gateway object for me?
Absolutely. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to spin it up. You don't have to attach
Hmm.
it. You don't have to do anything from that standpoint. Same thing for Azure, same thing for Google, and then same thing for any other cloud for that matter.
Okay. All right. I want to dive deeper into the Alkira architecture. This is interesting. And of course, Manan, you got a bunch of nerds listening to this, people that love to know how things work. So I'm going to ask a question that I think based on what you've told me so far is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And let's see where it goes. Describe what I'm unpacking when I open a box from Alkira. Is there a piece of networking hardware in there?
There is essentially no box at all. There is
That's what I
there
thought.
is no hardware to worry about. There is no software to worry about. you are consuming Alkira as a service. So which means that it's as simple as opening an account with Alkira. And once you have the portal access, all you have to do is go to the digital design canvas and point and click and draw your network like a Visio diagram. And once you draw your network, and network is in its most loose term in the sense that there is connectivity, there is services insertion, there is policies through which you can control how the traffic flows. And once you design that on your design canvas and say provision, in 30 to 40 minutes, your entire multi-cloud, multi-segment, multi-region network is up and running. And on top of that, from a day two standpoint, you have all of the troubleshooting tools available to you to debug when something goes wrong.
You waved your hands and made that sound very magical. But so the question I think that comes to my mind is, yeah, but okay, so I designed it all on the canvas. That's cool. We've all used those sorts of tools there. They're awesome. But I've still got to plumb all of my outlying services into that thing that exists on a canvas, right?
Yes, absolutely. You do need to connect your on-prem. And what Alkira does, it provides a variety of different ways you can connect into the Alkira fabric. For example, some of our customers who have data centers today, they would bring in the connectivity to through a AWS Direct Connect or a Azure Express Route or a Google Interconnect. For branches and campuses, most customers don't hairpin their traffic through a data center anymore. They actually take the traffic through one of their existing SD-WAN vendors where the SD-WAN headend would reside inside the Alkira Cloud Exchange point. And then we talked about the partners and how they typically come in through a standards-based IPsec. And then last but not the least, in this day and age, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen a lot of remote users connecting from their homes, from the Starbucks, so on and so forth. So that is where you can leverage ZTNA to directly land a user into the Cloud Exchange point. So there are multiple different ways users can bring their on-prem networks and attach to the Alkira fabric.
Okay, ZTNA, we're going to follow up on that a bit later. I got some questions for you about that. I know you guys just announced that as a new feature that you're offering, so we do want to dig into that. But to go back and summarize my connectivity options, it sounds very typical. Like if I want to connect to any of the big three public clouds, very similar kind of a process.
Yeah, very similar, but typically we have seen at least in any network of substantial size, most customers don't have one way of doing it. They will have SD-WAN, they will have Direct Connect or Express Route, they will have IPsec. So there's many different ways customers connect and concurrently. It's not that I just do. It's not that I'm going to bring all traffic through a Direct Connect and we call it done. That is how customers were doing it maybe 6, 7, 8 years back. But that's no longer necessarily the right way to do it. And that's not what customers are doing today.
I want to dig into the cloud exchange point a bit more. First of all, you've got a bunch of these, you said, scattered globally. How many POPs have you got?
So Alkira is available in every region of AWS, every region of Azure, and every region of Google. So think of Alkira is completely born in the cloud. So we're not a company that brings up POPs in a hardware or a co-location facility. Alkira is riding on top of the cloud providers' infrastructure. So from that standpoint, whenever you think of a region of AWS, Azure, or Google, think Alkira is available there.
Well, that was my next question was, did you guys build your own backbone? And the answer sounds like no, you're leveraging the huge fiber networks that Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have built.
Yeah, and they not only invest tens of billions of dollars building out this very robust network, they actually peer with each other in an extremely friendly way. So we actually absolutely leverage their capabilities underlying infrastructure.
It's pretty interesting if you begin studying internet routing patterns. When your traffic goes into a cloud service provider, it may have basically just hit a couple of internet hops to get in there, and then that's it. It's the rest of the hops are inside the cloud provider because they cover so much territory. Another point you made about the cloud exchange points and the way they abstract the big three public cloud providers, you made a comment, something along the lines of there's no cloud limits, no cloud restrictions. So again, if let's say my VPC is limited to, I don't know, 100 routes, coming into my BGP process, you're saying I don't have that limit anymore, or that you handle that limit for me?
We handle that limit for you, and the way we do that is the networking capabilities are Alkira's. So think of a old router solution where Cisco, for example, may have a chip from somewhere else or their own, and then they build networking software on the router, and then they sell through a systems integrator. Similarly, think of Alkira's fabric as the underlying compute nodes. Just raw compute power is what Alkira leverages from the cloud providers. And on top of that, Alkira builds this fabric through its own networking proprietary architecture that we have, and that is what is deployed. So when you peer from, let's say, your data center to Alkira and build that connectivity, let's say even if it's direct connect, we actually build an overlay on top of that direct connect. And because of that, the BGP peering is between your data center router and Alkira node. So for the longest time, AWS, I'm just taking AWS as an example, was supporting 200 route prefixes to be exchanged, whereas some of Alkira's customers have 40,000 routes exchanged between the data center and the Alkira fabric.
So in that overlay model, then that's all hidden away from AWS. I'm not peering with AWS. It has no idea what's happening. I'm peering to Alkira.
Exactly. So Alkira becomes your peering point from a route exchange standpoint, and then you're essentially doing what you need to do in terms of Alkira policies. We have all the standard routing policies, traffic policies, NAT policies to provide robust networking capabilities through the fabric.
And then when I'm connected in, have you spun up a unique routing instance for me, kind of like a VRF?
Yeah, so not just one. Customers can get multiple VRFs. So for any customer that is of substantial size, this day and age, you need segmentation. So each segment in Alkira's definition is a VRF. So customers can have their corporate VRF, their extranet VRF, like what we were talking about extranet earlier today. And then they could have their acquiring company, they could have a acquisition VRF, and then this can slowly integrate across these segments. So yes, absolutely, you can keep your traffic isolated.
Okay. Let me run a scenario by you that's pretty common for a lot of folks that are building multi-cloud networks. They can be a bit of a mess, all depending. So the scenario is, let's say I'm running services. I'm in all three, the big three public clouds. I've also got 3 on-premises sites as well. So I'm in 3 clouds. I got these 3 other sites. And right now, to connect this together, I've got this mix of internet-based VPN tunnels. I got some colo cross connects going on. I got firewalls here and there and everywhere. And then BGP is the routing to keep all of this going. Now, if I bring Alkira in, what does that network I described end up looking like?
Yeah, so that network changes quite a bit in terms of how you efficiently manage your network and deploy it, but some of the constructs remain the same. And what I mean by that is the best practice that Alkira recommends is to build a CXP in each region of your choice. So let's say you are a global customer. You can build a CXP in US West, a CXP in US East, maybe 1 or 2 CXPs in Europe, and maybe 1 or 2 CXPs in Asia. And then within the region, you would discover all of your cloud workloads. You said you were in 3 clouds. So you will just put your credentials for those 3 clouds, and Alkira will automatically discover all of your workloads running. All you need to do is point and click and say, this workload goes in inventory segment or a PCI segment. This workload goes in a corp segment, so on and so forth. And Alkira will take care of all of the underlying plumbing. Now, you don't need a colo with Alkira solution. You don't need cross connects from all the cloud providers. All you need to do is either come into one of the cloud providers where the CXP is running, or you can just use SD-WAN and come to CXP. And from there, Alkira manages all of the connectivity to all three cloud providers. That way you can do firewall consolidation. I don't need to deploy firewalls in all three clouds. If you absolutely want, you can, but that's not what most customers do. So you can have one cross connect or one SD-WAN fabric coming in. You can discover all of the workloads and stitch that together. One set of firewalls in there, one set of load balancers in there, and you can also do one set of DDI kind of service like info blocks in there, and you just build your network through that way.
Let's say I'm a customer with big bandwidth needs and I'm paying for a DX circuit from AWS that's something big, 100 gig, let's say. You could accommodate that need?
Yeah, so Alkira's architecture, as I talked about, is scales horizontally and vertically. So from that standpoint, some of the largest customers of Alkira have throughput in that range. So you can bring in a large direct connect, and Alkira's solution is to essentially leverage that and essentially build overlay for each segment. So typically customers would bring in one direct connect per segment. We don't really require that. We can just bring in one direct connect and we can build multiple different segments on top of them as an overlay and exchange route. So you can also do consolidation there as well.
It seems like the ultimate answer to that question is if I've got a hodgepodge today with kind of almost a best of breed approach or whatever the compromise or trade-off I had to make at a given site based on budget and whatever was available to me, I end up with a more homogeneous, a somewhat simplified architecture is how it should feel to me once I've got Alkira fully deployed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. With better visibility and control.
All right, the network's up and running, and I want to automate Alkira network service lifecycle. So that is my Alkira network is running, and I want to do automation. What are my automation options?
So you have 4 different options in terms of accessing the Alkira service. One is the obvious one, which is a very intuitive design canvas that we talked about, where you can point and click and design your network. Now, when you want to do something at scale, you want automation built in. So Alkira does provide APIs to begin. That means that every single function or interaction that you have on the user interface, you can do it using the APIs as well. We are an API first company from that standpoint. Then you have SDKs. So you can leverage the SDKs. And the last but not the least, which is very, very heavily used in our customer base, is Terraform. So Alkira is a Terraform provider. So you can use Terraform to deploy all of your network without even touching the UI at all. So those are the different options. And realistically, for larger enterprises, they would use at least 2 of the 4 interfaces to interact with the Alkira service. Now, one of our customers have done something very interesting. In large enterprises, as you know, there's networking teams, there's security teams, and there's app dev teams. So some of our larger customers, what they do is from a networking standpoint, they'll define all of the segments and the micro segments and the basic policies of interaction, rules of interaction. Then the security team will come in and deploy the firewalls and deploy the security posture. Then what they've done is they've told the app dev teams that when you deploy an app in any of these clouds, we will give you a limited role-based access control, and you use Terraform to not only deploy your app in the cloud, but do the network stitching using Alkira's provider, so you are self-sufficient. And networking and the security team does not have to be in the critical path, although you will, based on the app and that you're deploying and based on the segment and the group that you're deploying in, you will automatically inherit the policies that you should be getting for the app that you're deploying. So it's essentially they have provided a self-service to their app developers and removed themselves from being in a critical path.
I'm smiling because that's the holy grail. That's the thing that any of us that are talking about automation and trying to build out an automation system, you want to get to a self-service a place with self-service that you can safely offer those routine networking constructs to the developer community so that when they got to roll out a new, whatever the new environment is, whether it's prod or one of the earlier stages of that application pipeline, they can just stand it up without having to bother anybody. And the business is comfortable because, yeah, there's a pipeline here. There's templates. We know exactly what's going to get stood up. There's no risk here. It's just automated.
Yeah, and it's become a single CI/CD pipeline.
And developers are going to love that because they don't have to throw a ticket over the wall, and then we don't have to catch the ticket on the other side. Well, do the thing, throw it back to them, and all of it's just yeah. This is the modern approach, but that if you're building it by hand, it's hard. There's a lot to it, and there's not a lot of things that, quote unquote, off the shelf can do that for you. Although
let's not just say it's hard. It's almost impossible to do that, and that's why you need something like that works across the board, works on the network, whether it's on-prem to cloud, whether it's cloud to cloud, whether it's cloud to internet. All of that, along with compliance. Compliance becomes important when you have production workloads in the cloud. And this will give you that single point of compliance from that standpoint.
You mentioned extranet earlier. So, you know, that network I was describing earlier, big 3 public clouds, 3 on-premises sites, and now I've got key business partners that I want to add to this network with the obvious caveats, the normal ones. Limited access, specific resources, that's all you can get. How do I do that?
Alkira has some unique functionalities. We call it resource share. In the traditional networking language, think of them as inter-segment route leaking. So typically customers, what they do is they create network segments on Alkira Fabric. As I said, there could be a corp segment and there could be a extranet segment. And then they land all of these partners on that extranet segment. Now, by definition, a segment, if it's a VRF, it's completely isolated and you have no communication whatsoever between the corp segment and the extranet segment. Now, once you land the partners in that extranet segment, you have to give access to certain resources. And that is what we call resource share or inter-segment route leaking. So in Alkira's language, you can deploy a policy that says that packet pushers is my business partner, but when packet pushers communication comes in, I only want to give them access to this one app in this one VPC. And by the way, when that traffic comes in, I want to take it through a firewall inspection before it goes to the workload. So that is what we call inter-segment route leaking or resource share, where you can control which partners have access to what resources on your corp network and selectively deploy a policy that says what traffic is allowed, what traffic is denied, and what traffic has to be service inspected.
It's a little more elegant than the way I built these solutions in the past, where you got a bunch of extranet partners coming in. Maybe some of the shops I work with, they had direct circuits into us, and we'd land them on a router in our data center, and then push that through access lists or through a firewall or through a private VLAN or all of those things, and then manually having to manage policies for each of those. This feels more integrated.
Exactly. And Ethan, you wouldn't believe how many conversations I've had with customers who have built this extranets, and over time people have changed, the rules have changed, and they have no understanding of what each rule means in that policy. And as a result, they are extremely afraid to even touch the policy anymore. And that's become something that nobody in the company wants to touch or interface with, because you don't know what you'll break with. So here you have a much more elegant and efficient way of doing it, and you can control it in such a way so that you can make changes very easily.
Yeah, it's funny what you say about the no one dares touch anything. I've been in that situation of inheriting firewalls and policies that are very lengthy and going, no one knows anything about these. And you're like, okay, well, we're going to start logging everything and see if any of these rules get hit. And we'll go from there and start chopping things out. And it's a multi-month, painful, tedious process. And that's assuming the rule base is small enough that you can actually do that, let alone the people that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of rules scattered across devices. So, yeah. Okay, let's talk about M&A for a minute. Let's extend our network again. So we've got this extranet we've added to our network, and now we've acquired a company. And of course, Manan, because of course, RFC 1918, there's trouble with overlapping IP address space. How do I get them on the Alkira cloud?
Yeah, so it's interesting twist here because the same similar concepts that you use for bringing your extranet business partners, you can actually leverage here to integrate acquisitions. So if you acquire companies, typically I would say 99% of the time you will have some overlap. It's very, very rare that you will not have overlap. So what you would do is you bring that acquisition network, the company that you acquired, as a separate network segment altogether, and you have your own network segment, and then selectively allow them to communicate. And Alkira has intelligence built into the fabric of auto detecting overlapping routes and allowing you the control to do NAT policies so that you can exactly do the natting and allow only selective resource access across companies. That is how customers start. Another public reference customer of ours, Chart Industries, they have two network segments on our fabric. One is called the IoT segment, and one is called the corporate WAN segment. And then they ended up acquiring a company in Europe, and they brought that as a third segment on our fabric, and then selectively allowed resources to be shared as and when it was required. So it's a very, very elegant way of merging the networks over a period of time. And typically, when you acquire a company, it takes 6 months to integrate a network. Here you can do it in as simple as 6 days.
Yeah, the automatically detecting overlapping routes and being able to stand up a NAT policy is very interesting. I've been in this situation a number of times. And it depends on the situation. Who needs access to what? Sometimes you've got overlapping address space and you kind of don't care because the one side doesn't need to talk to the other side on that particular subnet, so you can get away with it. It's okay. You just selectively advertise certain routes and filter off, the routes, and you're okay. But it's always there. It's always this thing you got to think about. But then there's those needs where it's like, I've got to have NAT. These sides have to chat in the short term, but you guys are going to renumber, and then you sit there and you're gonna
And that
make them
never
renumber
happens
and
then.
everybody hates it. Yeah, and it just takes forever. It's too hard. We can't renumber. We'll break things. We don't know what
Yeah.
will break. Didn't you use DNS when you built the app? No, we hard coded it. You hard coded IP, etc. I don't know how many times we've had those conversations, but yeah, this sounds, Manan, you make it sound very easy, especially for those of us that have had to build these solutions by hand. Uh,
And
is it
Ethan, to be
really that
honest,
easy?
that is our sweet spot in the sense that customers and people who have actually done the hard work in networking and who know how much painful it is, and when they look at a solution like Alkira, that's the easiest win for us because they appreciate the simplicity. At the same time, they appreciate the comprehensiveness of the networking capabilities that we bring to the table.
Hmm. Well, all right. Another networking capability was mentioned earlier, and I wanted us to get back to it. That is ZTNA. You just announced ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. I think if I could summarize Zero Trust Network Access as a technology that's taken on the world in the last couple of years here, we're recording this in late 2024. It's VPN, but it's fancy VPN because there's a lot more intelligence behind it. It can do security posture analysis of endpoints that are talking and monitors transaction by transaction what's going on and so on. When you say ZTNA, is that the sort of solution you're talking about?
Yeah, so see, the challenge with VPNs historically has been that once you come into the network, you have full access into the network. And in this day and age, you really don't want that. You want least privilege access. So what we do in ZTNA is not only authenticate and authorize a user, but based on the posture check of the user, we will allow admins to define policies to have control of what resources are accessible. Let me give you a simple example. I can say that Ethan Banks from Packet Pushers if he comes from his packet pusher's laptop, from his home, or from his work location, he has access to prod and non-prod applications. If Ethan comes from his home laptop, he has access to only dev workloads, no matter whether if he's at his home, his work, or he's at Starbucks. And if Ethan comes from his home laptop or a personal laptop or a personal device from an unknown location, then he has only internet access. So what that means is now you are getting authenticated, you are getting authorized, you are getting checked from a posture standpoint, and based on the posture and identity and your authentication and authorization, you inherit a policy that allows you access to only the resources that you should be accessing. And that is what we call ZTNA. And the most important thing, the other important thing is you don't need to worry about multiple different profiles or how you connect. You have one client, you have one profile that you connect to, no matter where you go. So if you are in Europe, you'll connect to a CXP in Europe. If you are in US West, you'll automatically connect to a CXP in US West. You as a user don't have to change anything whatsoever on your device.
So the thing you just mentioned about where I connect to is interesting as well. It's not as if I got to stand up a firewall cluster or a group of VPN concentrators to bring my ZTNA users in. They're connecting. So you said clients. There's an Alkira client here.
There is a secure connect client that runs on your device. And essentially from that standpoint, you just connect to the nearest cloud exchange point and think of that as a centralized management plane with a distributed data plane.
So I'm connected in now, and that client, it knows what company I'm coming from. So I'm connecting to the right VRF, if you will.
Yeah.
And then all my regular security policies are governing my conversations.
Yes, absolutely. And the beauty of this, Ethan, is that you have one way of managing your network. And when I say network, it could mean cloud to cloud, it could mean on-prem to on-prem, it could mean on-prem to cloud, and most importantly, also it could mean user to app and user to internet, as well as on-prem to internet and cloud to internet. One way of enforcing all your policies in one place across all these different types of disparate networks.
I was reading that this isn't just for users, that app-to-app conversations can be governed by the ZTNA process as well.
Exactly. That's the goal, right? Because now you have, when I say cloud to cloud, it really means app to app, because you want to control that. You want a single policy infrastructure and set of visibility and enforcement and governance in one way of doing it across your network. Whether the user is in a coffee shop, the user is at a work location, the user is at home, or whether your network traffic is coming from a branch or a campus, you want one place to have the visibility, one place to have the enforcement, one place for governance.
I do. It's just getting my head around that, because I'm very used to different solutions governing different points of entry, if you will. And app to app is a different thing. Like, I mean, am I running a client on, how am I doing my enforcement at that point?
Yeah, because similar to how you did the on-prem to cloud environment, your cloud workloads are connecting to Alkira Fabric as cloud connectors. And once you have the cloud connectors, you can deploy a policy in Alkira to control the cloud to cloud as well. So that is what we call a single policy engine that gives you full set of governance capabilities across all types of networks.
Okay, Manan, so you've got ZTNA now. You've added that to the plate, and it's not just a VPN replacement. It's a more robust way of thinking about communications, across anything that's connected into the Alkira cloud. And I resonate with the one place to do my security policies. I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. This has been an interesting conversation, Manan, because again, I came into this having not heard from Alkira for a while. I think the last time we had chatted was maybe 4 years ago or so, 2020-ish. And I really thought he was that multi-cloud networking solution. Yeah, make it easy to connect, Amazon, Azure, and GCP. That's not it. That's just a use case.
Absolutely, that is a use case on the platform. You have to look at Alkira as an end-to-end networking platform, Ethan, that provides many different use cases. That doesn't mean you have to start with all the use cases. That's the beauty of a SaaS delivered solution where you can pick and choose the use case that you want. And we have a variety of different business models. I know this is a technical show, but you can consume it like a typical pay-as-you-go from a cloud provider, or you can buy it like a subscription, like as a network vendor. But you have multiple different options, and you can just use Alkira for one use case or many use cases. Think of that as an end-to-end networking platform.
Okay, yeah, that and from what you've described and what we talked about today, that makes sense. That's the right way to think about Alkira. All right, Manan, if people want to bother you, and by bother, I mean ask you questions more about Alkira, are you reachable?
Absolutely. I'm always available on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn profile is in the notes section. So please connect with me, and I'd love to engage and understand your use cases and your needs.
That's Manan Shah. And Manan, final question, where do people go if they want to find out more information about Alkira?
For Alkira, we have you can go to alkira.com. There's a use cases and solutions page, which includes the ZTNA and the single, hybrid, and multi-cloud networking, the backbone as a service, the extranet as a service. So there's lots of information on alkira.com, along with a lot of customer success stories.
Manan, thank you for joining us today, and thanks to you for listening to today's Heavy Networking. And again, special thanks to Alkira for sponsoring today's episode. Not only do our sponsors keep the bills paid here at Packet Pushers, but they fulfill one of my personal goals of keeping networkers up to date on as wide an array of current technology as possible. So if you want to know a broader range of options to solve networking challenges of your organization, you need to educate yourself, and we try to be that for you. Now, if you call up Alkira to explore further, would you let them know that you heard about them on Packet Pushers? That would help us out a lot, and we really appreciate that. I have been Ethan Banks. Drew Conray Murray will return to the co-hosting chair next week. If you have questions or comments about this episode, would you send us a follow-up message via packetpushers.net/follow-up? We will get you an answer or connect you with someone who can. And until next time, just remember, too much networking would never be enough.